Here's what I did this week on the farm. I finished collecting all my sandbags and hoops and all my unused insect netting. I put the insect netting away using that same daisy chain braid that I used for the shorter pieces of rime. I finished setting up my last row of cucumber trellising. All that's left now is to put foam pool noodles along the edges so I don't cut myself when I'm harvesting. I'm really excited to see how that trellising turns out. I need to remove the kale and the bolting lettuce that's beneath it right now so that I can kind of make space for my lettuce transplants that are starting up. I also added some additional support to my borage and my cilantro. The borage, I added some Hort Nova over. I don't know how much it's helping. It was kind of more of in a fit of get this shit off the ground. It keeps scratching me. So I hope it likes it. The bees at least love the borage. I'm trying to get a sense of how I can sell edible flowers at markets still because I don't know how well they'll last in a clamshell without being in like ice water. Still figuring that out, but at least the pollinators are getting some joy. And I also added an additional string to some of my tomato rows that are getting a bit bigger. And on my first round of tomatoes, the little partial bed I planted, I finally got some tomatoes going, but they're only like a few and it's not enough to really sell. I'm hoping it'll be enough to get a harvest for my CSA members, if not this week, then next week. And then hopefully by August, I'll have tomatoes to sell at market. Fingers crossed. The cosmos are also like there's a few that just got huge and they're tipping the Hort Nova and it's pissing me off. And it's also making it hard to deadhead the rest of the cosmos because it's just frustrating being in that little aisle. And I'm trying to clean that up. And it might mean losing more of the plant than I would like to lose, but I'd rather it not be frustrating being in the space so that I can be in the space more. Yeah. So I think, and I there are so many cosmos that it's not like I'm worried I won't have enough to make bouquets out of still. That's where I'm at with cosmos. And I also staked and strung up my tomatillos. They actually had gotten quite big. I hadn't really realized because they were sprawling a bit more. I'm hoping the tomatillos like the new structure and I'm hoping, I mean, there were quite a few little bulbs, so I'll have tomatillo soon, which is exciting. Thank you to Empowered Flowers for the starts. I hadn't even thought of tomatillos, and then they brought over their BCS to let me use it a few months ago. Oh my gosh, maybe just last month. And they brought over some starts that they didn't need, and I have really appreciated them. So thank you so much. I also topped some of my basils. I've got a lemon basil, a sweet Thai basil, and a Genovese basil. I put the tops in a hanging drying situation that kind of looks like those tubes you'd play in as a kid. So I'm excited to have those going so that I can in the future have dried goods that I can kind of sell over the winter. I'm thinking herb blends, salt blends, and scented sachets. I really would love to get into teas, but I know that there's more of like a science to the herbalism there. And I would like to take time to learn that before making teas for people. I also harvested for, well, 1.5 markets and my week 6 CSA. I had done a partial harvest for my Tuesday market, but then ended up getting canceled because it was going to be like 100 plus that day and there was just like a heat advisory. So it ended up being canceled for that, which ended up working out because I was able to see the Odyssey that night with my friends. So it would have been nice to have market, but there was a highlight, and I would not have wanted to be standing around for like 6 hours in 100+ degree weather. So neither would my vegetables. I was able to harvest 11 bouquets this week. I'm trying to be a bit better about having an inventory going into market days so that I can have a better sense of how much I need for each market so that I'm not just like semi blindly harvesting. So I had an inventory this week. I lost quite a bit of lettuce heads to a deer that managed to get into my electric fencing. So I think my next purchase is going to have to be a trail camera to figure out what the fuck is going on. I'm guessing that they can just see it still and they're not running into it before jumping over it, which is kind of like how it's supposed to work. So I'm going to get a trail camera, hopefully this coming week, if not then next week. And then I can get a sense of what the fuck is going on. My hardening off area is filling back up again, which means my seeding needs to be back on the to-do list for next week. I have a few trays of lettuce that are going to be ready to transplant probably in like 2 weeks. I have bok choy and amaranth and a bunch of other stuff that's going to be ready to transplant next week. So I'm excited about that, which also means I'll have to be clearing the field a bit of some spent greens and maybe some greens that aren't quite spent, but I need to plant. So that's up for next week. And what I also had happening this week is my friend Delaney came to visit. We cooked a bunch, we saw the Odyssey, and she helped me a lot with weeding aisles. It was quite hot when she was here, so I really appreciated all the work she did. And she tidied up some of my aisles real nice. It was really nice having her here. I love when friends visit, and it's just nice being able to show people around. That's what I did this week. It was a lot of tidying and harvesting and weeding. So now time for Content Corner. As I have mentioned already quite a few times, I saw the Odyssey this week. It is as good as anyone is saying. I really, really loved it. I've always really loved like Greek mythology, mythology in general. Like it was my favorite subject in English class in high school. I took a few different courses in college and it just like and what I just found really fascinating about Nolan's take on the Odyssey with this retelling was the way he kind of made it seem like this is I don't know. To me it just felt like this is what it would have felt like. Like obviously I know there's been like a hullabaloo about like it's not historically accurate armor. It's not historically accurate anything blah 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 blah. And there's also been quite a bit said about like the lack of the presence of the gods in the story. But I do think that like the anachronisms kind of make it more relatable and translatable into like a modern telling. I mean, it's in literally an archaic story. It was an old story when it was originally told in ancient Greece. Like, it's not like, I think the way in which he made it emotionally accurate was worth the sacrifice of the historical inaccuracies. And I really loved Agamemnon's whole fucking thing. The fact that that's Ben Safdie really blew my mind. My personal take on the way he told the story of the gods is that, like, my take on Zendaya's portrayal of Athena is that he was remembering the priestess he saw beheaded. I mean, spoiler alert, I guess, for the Odyssey, but he was seeing the priestess, and then in his mind, that's who he was conversing with as like almost a PTSD response or something. I just really loved it. And I really loved the way it looked. I just thought it was visually really stunning. For 3 hours, I like didn't even think once about how long the runtime was. I think that's a feat in and of itself. And I think the overall commentary on like the way war destroys humanity is poignant. And something else about the Odyssey is I loved the way it incorporated the sea people who are like a theorized part of the collapse of the Bronze Age, which is really like what Matt Damon is referring to in his like end monologue. And I really am obsessed and fascinated by the sea people. The idea of like this roving group of people who only we only know about them because of the surviving record in Egyptian written history about the sea people, because all of the other civilizations that existed at the same time collapsed. And it's probably not explicitly because of the sea people, but like a myriad of other things that happen simultaneously. But it's just like a really fascinating part of ancient history that I highly recommend looking into. Which brings me to what I suggest listening to this week, which is Throughline's episode on the sea people and the collapse of the Bronze Age. It's called The Aftermath of Collapse Bronze Age Edition. It's really informative and it's, I just think, really fascinating. And I am obsessed with the sea people and I think you should look into them. It is just really interesting history. And I think the way Nolan described it is kind of how I think the sea people were, which was just like not a group, one group of people, but just like roving marauders who like no longer felt connected to a city state and were just doing whatever they wanted. And I think that kind of is the collapse of civilization and feels poignant today. So that's what I was watching and listening to this week. Please see the Odyssey. You like need to see it in theaters. I don't think you have to see it in IMAX. I'm sure it was great in IMAX. It's not a possibility for me, so I'm a theater's great. Any theater will do. So Yeah, that's what I did this week. I'll catch you back here next week for week 30.